Hi, my name is Tayva Singer from CaliQuiltCo.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make this really cuddly plush pillow. First, we start with a ½ yard of fabric. The Shannon Fabrics Cuddle is the very best on the market. That's why we sell so much of it. We love it. And you need an 18-inch piece, a ½ yard, and it comes 60 inches wide. And for this, we need it to be 18 inches by 42 inches. So the first thing we want to do is slice off an 18-inch piece. Now this is a great size scrap, so you'll want to add that to your stash and save that for a future product or project. Now I have this piece right here in front of me. It's 18 inches by 42 inches. The first part that I cut, this part right here with Cuddle, when you cut it, especially these longer luxe cuddles, it can have what we call cuddle dust or cuddle fluff, and it can be a little messy. You can cut it and put it straight into your dryer for 5 or 10 minutes on fluff, and then it will be lint and messiness. All that messiness is free. It's gone. Another choice is just to shake it out over your garbage can. Now that we have that all done, what I want to do is I want to start by folding this over 1 inch. So I'm taking my cut end here and I'm going to fold it over about 1 inch and I'm going to pin it in place. With sewing, we have all different kinds of pins, but when you're sewing Cuddle, the very best pins are these Clover flower head pins, and I'll talk about those at the end. These are a really strong, sturdy pin, and so it can handle the weight and the thickness of Cuddle fabric without bending, because a bent pin is a bad pin. It's a pin you throw away. Okay, so time for my first seam. Bring this over to my machine, and I want to start with the Cuddle all the way underneath my presser foot, all the way. That helps my feed dogs be able to pull it. And then I want to lengthen my stitch, so I'm going to now increase my stitch to either 3.5 or 4 millimeters. I prefer 4. It makes the sewing go even faster. So now that I'm ready, I like needle down, and I'll start sewing, and I'll even back tack. I stop to pull out my pins, keep going. So you can see I'm using this big clunky foot. It's called a walking foot, and it's an even feed foot where it's pulling the fabric from the bottom with the feed dogs, and then it's pulling from the top with the walking foot. You can make this pillowcase without a walking foot, but it definitely makes this more fun to sew. It makes it easier work. And now I'm at the end. I'll do a little back tack, and that's done. Now I'm just going to trim those 2 threads. First seam done. That was easy. I want to put this right side up. And the first thing I'm going to do is fold the sewn piece. So where I just sewed that over, I want to fold this over 11 inches. So you can use any tape measure or ruler that you have. I have this cute little snail one. And I want this to be 11, and I have it at 12. We're going to back this up. And now I'm measuring just about 11. The next side I want to fold over about 12 inches. Let's measure and see where we're at. Too far. Back it up a little bit. So now that is 12 inches. And so again, checking, this is my selvage edge. I didn't have to do anything to that. And then this first inside is right sides together, my sewn edge, and now my selvage. So this measures 12 inches. I can put this out of the way, bring my pins over, and now one of the real tips and tricks to sewing Cuddle is to use a double row of pins. And so I'm putting in my first row here so that I can keep everything nice and straight, and I'm going through all 3 layers here, all 3 layers. And now that I have that first row pinned, I'm actually going to add a second row of pins. And this was magic once I learned to do this with Cuddle, because this is a knit fabric. It stretches while we're sewing and while we're handling it. And so by putting this second row of pins in, it keeps it from stretching and moving and shifting on us where we get those big bunches, and it just turns into a big hot mess, so we don't want that. Okay, flip it over to this side. Make sure everything is neat and smooth. Start pinning this side down. I'm actually going to start in the middle of this one. So again, I'm just pinning my 2 raw edges. So I've sewn one seam so far, and now I'm going to sew these two. These are going to be seams number 2 and seam number 3. This whole pillowcase only takes 4 seams total. I love it. You can make these for every single holiday and keep decorating your space. You can make so many of these as gifts. People will love it and they'll think, oh my goodness, this is so amazing. Be like, oh yes, it was very hard. It took a very long time. Okay, and then the other thing I didn't mention earlier, I mentioned that we want the 3.5 or the 4-inch stitch length, but we also want to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So again, I'm going to start with my needle down. I start on the fabric, then I can back tack. That just really helps the feed dogs to get a really good grip. So I'm sewing with my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I slow down right as I get to the layers all combining. And this is where I love to use my stiletto, and I can really hold and push this down. It keeps my fingers out of the way. Sewing on Cuddle, it's a very, very forgiving fabric. And by forgiving, I don't mean you're hurting its feelings. What I'm talking about is how something can be like just a little bit off, but you would never see it in the seam. So it still looks absolutely pristine and perfect, and something I really appreciate about sewing on at least really good quality Cuddle. So now I'm going to sew my second seam. Sometimes when you have really thick layers that you're trying to get under your presser foot, you can actually push up on your presser foot, and this gives you just a little bit of extra space to be able to get all the fabric under there easily. Forgot to back tack. It's not a big deal if you forget. You can do it later. You can skip it, but I tend to wash all of my Cuddle and all of my pillows a lot, so I like really sturdy seams. Now, this is starting to happen up here. You can see up close, I'm getting just a little bit of a bunch. I call this kind of a pucker. And so whenever this kind of a pucker, if you see this puffiness, whenever that happens, my trick is I pull my pin out, and then I want to put a little bit of even pressure on both sides, so behind and in front. I'm not stretching the fabric. Stretching is bad. I'm pulling it taut. There's a difference. And so if you look at this right now, this is me pulling it a little bit taut. And as you can see, like that puffiness is going away. And I don't have any puckers. I don't have any foldovers or any problem. Now, if it ever gets really bad and it does fold over or you get a pucker, it's not a big deal. If you don't want that pucker there, you can always back up and pop out a couple of stitches. You don't have to take out a whole entire seam. Pop a couple of stitches out and sew that part again. Again, it's a very, very forgiving fabric to sew with. Okay, now seams 2 and 3 are finished. That was so easy. Now we turn it right side out. When we turn the pillowcase right side out, we can use our fingers and kind of push the corners out. I actually have a tool for this. So for me, I'm usually lazy. I don't want to go find my tool or whatever I need, and so I'll grab for whatever is closest. And often I reach for a chopstick or a pencil, and I'm like, I'll use the eraser. And then I usually end up popping a seam by pushing that pencil eraser right through it. So there is a correct tool for doing this. This is the Clover point-to-point turner, and I love these. They're really inexpensive. Every sewing box needs one. And so for me, this is the kind of end I would really poke through. So I tend to use the soft one, and this corner is much softer and kinder, but it helps me to be able to push this out so I get a nice corner without popping my stitches. It's amazing how talented I am at popping stitches. If it can be ruined or broken, I'm your girl. Okay, so now those are all out. We have one final seam to do. So what I want to do now is just flatten everything out, and then I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to pin all the way around just to hold everything in place. I don't have to do a double row of pins. There's nothing particular or fancy or fussy about this. It's just to hold it in place because I'm going to go around and do a little top stitch now. I really like to make sure that I'm pinning down where I have my biggest thicknesses as well as my corners so that it doesn't shift on me at all. Okay, voila. Now, I don't want to start on the thickest part of my seam. I want to pick an easier part to begin. And so I might actually just start right down here. And I like to go around and top stitch at an 1.5 inches. And so I actually put a piece of tape on my machine because none of our little grids go out that far. And so I have marked it so this far line on my machine is 1.5 inches. You can eyeball it. You can do whatever you like. I like mine to look really uniform. And so I like to mark that. And so I use a piece of this tape. Here we go. Now, when I go to turn, if it's not all the way there on my mark, I can either back up or go forward. Very easy to do. Let's try that. That looks about right. It is. Yay. You can always mark that ahead of time. One of my tricks is to sew my pins in too, so I always like to feel for those and pull them out early. As I was sewing another sample to show you today, I sewed one of my pins and I'm like, perfect. It's one of my favorite tricks. When I'm holding the fabric back here, I like to help hold it taut, but you can see I'm not stretching the fabric. It's a really important difference. Now I'm going to slow down right before I hit this. This is 3 layers. It's very thick and bulky. And this is where I really like this by Annie tool, this stiletto. So I can really hold this down. So I'm going to go slow. And then just as I get here, I'll lift that and make sure all my fabric is feeding. And then I use this nice sharp steel point to push down on the cuddle and help it through. For the longest time, before I found those by Annie stilettos, I would always use a pin and I would try to do it. And these pins are amazing, but there is a limit to how much strength and power they have. So you can definitely sew this project without the by Annie stiletto, but that is something to put on your wish list. Voila! I'm going to pull this out and trim our threads. And we have a complete pillowcase. So you can see from the back, we have that visible top stitching. And now the only thing left to do is to stuff it. So one of my favorite brands is this Polyfill. It has the blue label on it. This one I really like. There's a more expensive that feels like a down alternative. I love that one too. But depending on price, there's a less expensive and a more expensive of these Polyfill. But it's really easy. You just open it on up. And the way this pillow works is you're just going to stuff it right inside. And this is a 14-inch pillow form, and I love this size for this pillow, but I also really like the 16-inch. And so you can use the exact same dimensions. So a 1/2 yard of Cuddle fabric, and you can make it just with the 14-inch, it fills it really nicely. With the 16-inch pillow form, it's just that much fuller. Gives you a bigger finish to it. And this is what we made. 4 seams, and you can make this Cuddle pillowcase cover. Make it for all of the different holidays. Keep changing your space 1/2 yard of Cuddle at a time. Now, to make today's project, I had a few different notions that make this project that much easier, and so I want to show them to you. I sell all of these things right at CallieQuiltCo.com. You can find it all over the internet, but CallieQuiltCo.com, we sell all of the Cuddle and we sell all of the tools to make it easier. So this was the Clover point-to-point turner that I was talking about. It's a really, really great tool to have when you're making stuffed animals, when you're sewing with Cuddle, even making regular standard pillowcases. It turns your seams beautifully and without all of the extra work. The other thing I didn't talk about in the beginning, but I highly recommend using a stretch 9014 needle when you're sewing on Cuddle. The stretch needle has a rounded tip, and so it doesn't split the fibers, causing frays and causing snags every time you wash it. Instead, it goes around, so it works with the knit fibers. So a stretch needle is very important. The Clover brand pins, I love these. I love pins, and so I collect pins and scissors of all different kinds, but these are the very, very best that you can possibly use for sewing on this Cuddle plush fabric. And then lastly, if you like to be able to mark your machine as well, I love this Cluck 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 Sew tape. What's really great is it's really soft like a washi tape, and so it comes right off and it doesn't leave any sticky residue on your machine. But it's also really nice because it has different marks, and so I use this for sewing so many different quilt blocks. So much of my sewing I use this tape for. It's easy to put on, it's easy to take off, it's really inexpensive, and every good sewing box needs that. But my name is Tayva Singer. I'm from CaliQuiltCo.com. Thank you for joining us. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to be able to see all of our new videos. Thank you.